Things in your life that keep you from following God. So we want to look at some of those things. Maybe the first thing, maybe it's the way you procrastinate the big things and even the small things in your life. Morty, give me a smoke, Morty. There they are. I just need one. There the baby is. I got it. There we go. Morty, watch this, Morty. Been doing this since high school. Watch this. Smoke rings, Morty, smoke rings. I still got it, huh?
You never lost it.
That's right. You got that right. 10-4, good buddy. You got that right.
Watch this.
What? I tell you, boy. I tell you, Morty, we've been saying we're going to stop the big things and even the small things in our life. I say it's not too late. I say we stop today.
How about tomorrow?
Okay.
Welcome, Allentown Victory in the Call. We're glad that we're joined together here for this time as Pastor Marcus is preaching some great messages on excellence during difficult times. God bless and enjoy.
Well, good morning once again. What a privilege it is for me to be together with you, Allentown Victory Church, and The Call for this joint time of continuing in our series of excellence in difficult times. And today we're moving into part 2 of this series. We're still looking at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel chapter 3. But today we're zeroing in on verses 8 to 12 with a message entitled Stand for What's Right. But let's read this text together. Daniel chapter 3, verses 8 to 12. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery in symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning, fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image that you have set up. In this passage of Scripture, we find three things that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were confronted with as they were now standing in the midst of the throng of people who made the decision to bow down and worship this golden image. They chose to stand because they knew it was the right thing to do. They knew that they could not worship any God other than the Lord God of Israel. And the first element that you may have noticed happens in verse 8. It opens with this statement: certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. The first thing that you notice here is there seems to be some kind of racial tension going on. There seems to be some kind of racial prejudice going on. It's one sector of people against another sector of people, one ethnicity against another ethnicity, one race against another race. You see, racism and ethnicity come to play in this account account in Scripture, as it does seemingly in many situations that we're finding going on across our nation today. Now, the judgments that happen, when people see people of all other cultures, of other races, there are judgments that take place. There are preconceived ideas that people may have that come into play. And that really is what racism is all about. Racism is a discrimination or a prejudice against people of another race, or belief that a particular race is superior to another. But even though people come with these preconceived ideas and these preconceived judgments, what does the Scripture say about this? You see, for us as Christians, it's important that we don't go along with the flow of what society is saying, but we need to go with what Scripture says. And how can one race be superior to another race when the Bible says that all people were created by God? In fact, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, it says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them." So if God created all people in his own image, is there anyone that can be better than another? Is there any group that can be better than another? The obvious answer is no. In fact, the founding fathers took a hold of this. They saw this in Scripture, and they took a hold of this when they wrote the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. In the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." In other words, these things are obvious to anyone who will take the time to think about it. That all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator, the Creator who created them in his own image, with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is what our nation, America, was founded on. The premise that all men are equal. All people are equal. And we know that even though the word men here is used, it is for mankind, human beings, that all are created equal. How do we know? Because Genesis 1:27 says God created man in his own image, male and female, he created them. So this is human beings. This isn't putting one gender above another or any race above another, but it is leveling the playing field, saying that we are all equal in the eyes of God, that God loves each equally. In fact, Paul says in Acts chapter 17, verse 26, that he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwelling. From one blood, from one line, God has created every nation. You have more in common with the people around you than you think. Ultimately, if we trace our lineage back, it traces all the way back to Adam and Eve. Studies in genetics have found that even though some people share the same skin color, genetically, they may have much more in common with someone who is of a different skin color halfway around the world from them. Why? Because ultimately we all came from the same place. We all came from God's hand as he created us in his image. So we came from Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and from there we began to spread out as God appointed the nations and the boundaries and the barriers. So what is our response then as Christians towards people that are different than us? People who look differently, people who talk differently, people who think differently. Well, the Bible is very clear. The response is love. How do we know? Because Jesus himself set that pattern. Probably the most famous passage of scripture in the Bible is John chapter 3, verse 16, which says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." Look at those first words, "For God so loved the world." This is everyone. Doesn't matter what race, doesn't matter what skin tone, doesn't matter what ethnicity they may be. They may be city dwellers, they may be country folk. It doesn't matter. God so loved the world. In recent months, we have seen some astonishing things, astonishing and heartbreaking things take place as we saw police officers who ended the life of a black man, as we saw Black Lives Matter protesters go into a restaurant and throw onto the ground the meal of an elderly white couple. Astonishing things, both sinful acts, both not honoring to God. But how do we as Christians respond? Well, we respond in the same way that God did. If God loves the police officers, what do? We love the police officers. If God loves the Black Lives Matter people, what do? We love those people who threw the meal onto the floor. Why? Because it doesn't matter who the people are. They are created in the image of God, and they are loved by God, and Jesus gave his life to redeem each and every one. No matter what our sinful actions may be, God paid the price when he sent Jesus to die on the cross of Calvary for your sins and for my sins, and each of us does have our own sins. And so excellence in the midst of difficulty is learning to love in the face of racial prejudice. The Christian's message needs to always be a message of love. There is no side that we are on other than the side of God, and God's side is always a side of love. Second, we need to learn to obey in the face of religious persecution. As we look at verses 8 to 11, we see that what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego actually went through, in addition to some racial discrimination, some racial prejudice, they went through religious persecution because they were told that they had to bow down and worship something other than the God that they knew to be true, the God who said, "You should not worship anyone but me." It says in verse 9, they spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery in symphony with all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the middle of a burning fiery furnace." They were now being faced with religious persecution. If Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow as they did, the thing that faced them was certain death in the natural understanding, in the natural way of doing things. But wait, they did not obey King Nebuchadnezzar. They chose to rather obey God. And there's actually biblical precedence for this. There are certain times where we have to make a choice. Are we going to fall in line with what a man is saying, with what man is doing, or are we going to obey God, even if it might cost us something as drastic as our very own life? In Acts chapter 5, verses 28 and 29, the apostles have been obeying Jesus. They've been going around and preaching the gospel and making disciples of all nations. They've been doing what Jesus told them to do, but the Jewish leaders had told them to stop. And we pick up in verse 28 and 29, and the Jewish leaders say, "Did we not strictly command you not to teach in this name? And look, you have filled Jerusalem with your doctrine, and intend to bring this man's blood on us." But Peter and the other apostles answered and said, "We ought to obey God rather than man." In our nation, particularly the state of Pennsylvania, we came into existence. We were established in large part to give people the freedom to worship God in the way that they saw the scriptures telling them to worship God. This nation was established as a haven for people to come and have the freedom to worship God, because in Europe at that time they were being persecuted for the way how they worshiped. If you were not part of the Catholic Church, or if you were not part of the Anglican Church, they were being persecuted. But here in America, there was the opportunity for freedom. And so whereas the leaders and those who were in authority, they set a certain pattern and a standard for the nation, and the Christians were trying to obey that, they realized that they had to honor God above that. And yes, they were persecuted. But here in America, they found that opportunity for freedom. And we need to recognize that even though, yes, we need to respect our leaders and those in authority, our allegiance, loyalty, and honor must always be first and foremost to God and to honor His word. In Revelation chapter 12, verses 10 to 11, we read, "Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death." In other words, people that are being spoken of here in Revelation chapter 12 are people who stand for God even to the point of losing their life. Are you willing to stand for God? Are you willing to obey, even if it might cost you your life? Now, living here in the United States, we may not realize it at this time, but worldwide, it has been said that Christianity is now considered the most persecuted religious group in the world. The Center for the Study of Global Christianity released a statistic that in the last decade, 900,000 Christians have been martyred. That is 90,000 Christians a year, or one Christian has lost his life every 6 minutes because of his faith in our Lord Jesus Christ. Are you willing to obey God even if it costs you everything? You see, excellence in the midst of difficulty is learning to obey God in the face of religious persecution. The third thing that we find Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego encountering in this passage of Scripture is political pressure. And so the third thing is we have to learn to honor in the face of political pressure. In verse 12, the accusation that was made by these Chaldeans was that there are certain Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Immediately this became a political statement. Immediately this went into politics. And the Bible actually gives us a very clear picture of what our relationship should be with our political leaders. In Romans chapter 13, verses 1 to 7, we read, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, everyone who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers who hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong." Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servant, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is why you pay taxes, For the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Now, this passage of Scripture is telling us how to relate to those in authority when our authority is not going against Scripture. And that's the thing that we have to recognize. You may not be happy about what's going on in the nation. You may not agree with policies that are being made. But as long as it is not contrary to the Word of God, as long as it is not in direct violation to the Word of God, our job is to submit. The only time that comes into question is when it clearly goes against the law of God. We will not sin against God in order to obey the laws of man. But as long as the laws of man do not violate the expressed laws of God, our job is to honor, respect, obey, follow, go in line. So when a speed limit sign says 55 miles an hour, as Christians, we should honor that as the law and drive 55 miles an hour. Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 1, 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 to 4. Therefore, I exhort first of all that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all men, for the king and all who are in authority, that we may lead quiet and peaceable lives in all godliness and reverence. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, who desires all men to be saved and to come to a knowledge of truth. You know, as we read this scripture, here's what Paul is saying. If you don't like what's going on, well, even if you do like what's going on, pray. You should be praying for your leaders and those in authority. We should be praying for those who are in the White House at this time. We should be praying for the upcoming elections. We should be praying for our governors and for every step along the way, all the way down to your city mayor and your city council. You should be praying for those people because they have authority over you. They make decisions that will direct your life and your future, and so you should be praying for them. And so I want to ask you this question, and I want you to think about this. When is the last time you prayed for your city councilman? When is the last time you prayed for those people who were on your school board? Yeah, probably with the elections coming up and everything going on in the news, you probably took time to pray. But there are actually a lot of Christians who probably have done more complaining than they have done praying. The Word of God says, pray, pray. Now, ultimately, our allegiance is not to any earthly king or to any nation or to any political party, but rather to Jesus, who is the King of Kings, who is the Lord of Lords. And as such, we have to bear in mind, now this may shock you, but God is not a Democrat or a Republican. Because in the first place, God is not even an American. God rather is the King of Kings. He is the one above every other nation. Jesus, who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, rules above all. And so, being that God is neither a Republican or a Democrat. Why? Why do I say that? Well, because we have to understand that both of these parties have elements in them that do not honor God. So God cannot be associated with either of them. And I know that's a shocking statement, and some of you are scrambling right now and panicking right now. But the Word of God is very clear. There are very clear things in the Word of God. And so how do we respond as Christians? Well, first and foremost, we need to understand that we are now part of God's kingdom. And as part of God's kingdom, we are to follow Jesus. Paul, in fact, said in Philippians chapter 3, verse 20, that our citizenship is in heaven. And so what do we do as citizens of heaven, but also as citizens of America? Well, first, we vote. That's a very important thing. We stand for what is true, and we share what the Word of God says. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, we read that we are therefore Christ's ambassadors. And as though God were making his appeal through us, we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. So, how do we vote? We vote based not on our preconceived ideas, not based on any party's ideology, not based on any news reports, not based on any peer pressure, but rather we vote based on what the Word of God says. So we vote in a clear conscience that what we are voting for lines up with the Word of God. And if we look at things and there is absolutely nothing there that lines up with the Word of God, what do? We pray and we ask God to guide us and to direct us. And we vote the best that we can in line with the Scripture, in line with what the Holy Spirit is directing us to vote. Now, this is a very touchy thing, I know, but we need to understand we are in this world. Yes, we are, but we are of a kingdom that is beyond this world, and we need to live first and foremost as citizens of the kingdom of God. My friends, we are living in a very crucial time here in the United States. Yes, just as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced this racial prejudice, we're seeing racial things going on around us. Just as they were challenged when it came to their religious freedom, there is challenges right now taking place in this nation regarding our religious freedom. Just as there was a political pressure, right now we're seeing political pressure all around us. Our job in this difficult time is first and foremost to love in the face of racial prejudice. Second, to obey God in the face of religious persecution. And third, to honor those in authority in the face of political pressure.
Hello, my name is Pastor Matthew Catricola, and hope you enjoyed that message there from Pastor Marcus of the series Excellence During Difficult Times, talking about standing for what is right. I want to ask you for a few questions here to be talking about in your gathering, in your house church, to be able to digest what you believe God could be speaking to you through this message. So number one, what do you appreciate from other cultures that is different from your own culture? Okay, so again, what do you appreciate from other cultures around you that is different from your own? Number two, can you give an example of seeing how love has overcome hate in either your life or someone else's life? So again, can you give a live example, a testimony of how you've seen love overcome hate either in your life or someone around you that you've been able to see it? Number three, what could the government tell you to do that you would feel God would want you to disobey? Okay, so let me ask that again. What do you feel the government would tell you or could tell you to do that you would feel God would want you to disobey? Now, be careful, don't get too divisive during this question here, but I do want us to also, if we're going to give an answer to that, to talk about what are some of the reasons why. What do we see in the Word of God for us to disobey those things? I see some people disobey some things here in this current culture, and I have to question what's the biblical grounds for that? Or are we claiming false biblical grounds for that? So again, I want to encourage you to be looking into and talk about what you feel for yourself, all right? Let's make it for ourselves. Let's not say, I believe every Christian should do this. What do you feel like? Or if the government asks me to do this, I feel like I have God's authority standing on His word to disobey that. All right, number four, how do we separate God's authority on someone and the sinner in the seat of that authority? So let me ask that again. How do we separate God's authority, okay, and the sinner that sits on that seat of authority? How do we separate those things? How can we still honor authority when there's someone in authority that perhaps is not godly or not doing what's right? Now again, we see some examples in what Pastor Marcus was talking about in the stories that we see throughout the Bible. So think about that, all right? Think about how you've seen that displayed or how you've seen that done. Okay, follow-up question to that. How do we honor God's authority without honoring sin? Okay, how do we honor God's authority without honoring sin? I believe this is very prevalent for our day and age right now. And I think it's important for us to chew on so we can effectively pray for our leaders and also honor them and not undercut our prayers in what we're saying and doing. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this time and talk about this, pray with one another, and God bless you. We'll see you next week.